District of Conservation is sponsored by the Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow, better known as CFACT. To learn more about our sponsor, head over to cfact.org. Thanks for listening to the program.
We're so done with New Year, New You. This year, it's more you on Bumble. More of you shamelessly sending playlists, especially that one filled with show tunes. More of you finding Geminis because you know you always like them. More of you dating with intention because you know what you want. And you know what? We love that for you. Someone else will too. Be more you this year and find them on Bumble.
Don't you love it when things are both easier and more affordable? Like when the rain washes your car for you. Or like when you save up to 10% by bundling your renters and auto insurance with USAA. Bundle with USAA and start saving. Get a quote today.
Welcome to District of Conservation. I'm your host, Gabriella Hoffman. This podcast offers a sober examination into all things hunting, fishing, shooting sports, energy, environment, and the public policy surrounding it. And this podcast also specializes in original interviews that you won't hear elsewhere. Here's what I have for you today. President Trump has officially entered office for a second term. And on day one, yesterday, he unleashed a blizzard of executive action to undo President Biden's net zero climate directives. I brought on a perfect person to deconstruct what Trump has signed into action, what it means for the future of energy in America. André Béliveau of Commonwealth Foundation, great understander of energy policy, really extrapolates things. We work together to get people educated about reliable energy. André, good to have you back on the program.
Hey, thanks, Gabby. Great to be here as always.
What was your impression with President Trump's blizzard of executive action, especially that geared towards energy? I think what was really notable, we had talked about this before going on the air, was how there's this shift in rhetoric. We don't see all of the above. We see reliable energy. We don't see net zero. We see affordable, secure, reliable energy. What do you make of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's 100% abundance over net zero, which is great. It's moving away from feel good, all of the above policies and towards reliable, affordable, secure energy policies to unleash American energy dominance. President Trump, this was one of the main areas of policy that got him elected, right? I mean, and I do policy work for Pennsylvania, and this was a main issue, whether it was fracking or energy affordability that impacted Pennsylvanians, but Americans across the country. So I was very excited to see, and there's so many. As I'm sure you are, I'm still reading through a lot of them, but this is a very exciting start to be able to unleash American energy dominance, and I'm excited by all of them.
The first one that I think is notable, which kind of cancels out this net zero framing and posturing that we have been very critical of, was his general rescinding or cessation, as they've called it, of a slew of executive orders, including two of Biden's day one or first week climate executive orders, the one to tackle the so-called climate crisis, and there was another climate-oriented one from his first day in office. That essentially, with Trump's actions here, removes all of that net zero framing there. So that was really exciting. And then also he had a separate one which relates to the day one executive orders from his predecessor, getting us out of the Paris Climate Accords. So net zero, dead on arrival, out of the Paris Climate Accords. I think that's a pretty solid statement, good start. And then he also has supplemental executive action, which we will go into. And some guests we're going to have on the program are also going to deconstruct further. But that's a really bold statement for him to do. He sees, and his advisors and incoming cabinet secretaries believe that that type of posturing and that framing, which goes along the lines of environmental, social, and governance, really has hamstrung our energy production here at home. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the posturing here and the direction is very clear. Climate radicalism is out, and people first policies are in. I think his Energy Secretary Chris Wright has done a great job of framing the narrative around human flourishing and what is necessary to do that. Same thing with Doug Burgum, they and Lee Zeldin at EPA. I mean, we saw these out of the hearings last week. It is very clear that these climate radical policies, these net zero policies, are out. They have done little to help our natural environment and done disastrous things to our economic environment. President Trump obviously understands that, and that's what we're seeing coming out of these executive orders. I think the Paris Climate Treaty is the executive order to pull out of that. Obvious move, slam dunk. I think now, honestly, it's President Trump can't do this alone. I think it's on Congress now to make sure that these executive orders, whether it's the removal of the Paris Climate Treaty or other areas, permitting reform, or even, and we'll get into these later, but things like the LNG pause, these things are going to need the teeth of federal law to back these executive orders, so that these great things to help pull all the levers of American energy dominance are in place, but that they won't be reversed in the future by a different administration. So these executive orders are, full steam ahead. All the levers have been pulled, and now I think it's on to the individual agencies to figure out the areas of responsibility and the statutes that impact them, for them to put, President Trump's plan in place. And it's also now on Congress to make sure that where necessary, all of these executive orders are now backed by being codified into federal law.
We're even seeing those existing laws amended, because President Biden, on his way out of office, as we know, used a clause in the 1950 era law on offshore oil and gas leases to justify future prohibition of exploration on 365 million acres. So they'll have to go in and tweak that provision to clarify and say that there's no blanket prohibition. We should clarify what the statute says. So absolutely, it is incumbent upon Congress, now that there's a trifecta that's for energy dominance, for energy abundance, they should give President Trump this codifying to really make his policies have teeth. So absolutely, that definitely has to be administered. And speaking of the Unleashing American Energy Executive Order, there were so many things, as you mentioned, the restoring of LNG export terminal construction. There was also the lifting of the EV mandate, the household appliance bans under Department of Energy, expediting permitting reform under NEPA and related laws. So many good things were administered through that. Was there anything else in particular that stuck out to you as a very workable policy?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one for me in the policy area that at the organization I work for that we've cared a lot about has been the LNG pause that was brought about by President Biden, and to see that get released, and now we can start looking at new licenses for LNG terminals, potentially, and hopefully one in the port, in Philadelphia would be tremendous. So the reversal of the LNG pause, I think, is a slam dunk, particularly when we're talking about energy dominance, right? Because it's one thing to have energy security here at home. When we think about energy security, we're thinking about having a reliable and resilient and secure grid. When we think about energy independence, we're talking about, as President Trump likes to say, the liquid gold, to make sure that we have enough energy supply here, particularly in oil and natural gas, and obviously with minerals and uranium mining that we need for our nuclear fleet. Those are things we're thinking about when we're talking about energy independence, that we can produce energy here at home, so that we have secure and independent. When we're talking about energy dominance, it's all of that, and also to ensure that we're expanding into regional and global markets, and our ability to get our clean LNG to our geopolitical allies across the globe is super important. And that was something that was stifled by the Biden-Harris administration, that now on day one, President Trump has unlocked it and said that, nope, we shouldn't be looking at Moscow. People should be looking at, Pittsburgh and Houston for their LNG needs. And I think we are clearly, the LNG pause for me was a big one. There's several other ones. I think, we'll have to see. Like, one of the things, Gabby, you and I have talked a lot about is the EPA clean power plant rule that came out of the Biden-Harris administration, which essentially shackled existing coal plants and new natural gas plants, essentially trying to take reliable energy offline. I think, again, all the levers are in place for the EPA and for other agencies to start to now examine what they need to do to roll back all of these kinds of things. So we are certainly on the pathway to American energy dominance, and it's going to take these executive orders to move forward into the agencies, again, for Congress to do its job and make sure that appropriate laws are passed to give these things teeth and to strengthen these policies. And what we saw with the reversal of, like, Chevron doctrine, for example, I think there's obviously there's going to be favorable protections to make sure that the laws that are enacted by Congress and the executive orders that are passed by President Trump are going to be protected as constitutional by judges, because that's how it should flow. If the legislature is making the laws and they're signed into law by the executive, it's the judiciary's job to make sure that those are maintained, not to create new law. So I think even some of these legal strategies that we've seen from some of these climate radical groups are now also hopefully are DOA and going to start to slow down. That now we have not only good policies coming through there, but we have a proper constitutional system of government with appropriate checks and balances, and that the lawmakers are making the laws, and that the judiciary is that they are not lawmakers wearing black robes. That's not how it's supposed to work. So I'm excited about the policies, but I'm also excited about the restoration of proper usage of government and checks and balances and constitutionalism more broadly. So lots of things to be excited about in the coming days.
That's certainly true. The delegation of powers to the various branches, and also the fact that when we were playing defense, we saw that LNG export terminal projects were held legally, that they were in the public interest as the law that governs LNG exports and LNG policy stated. So I believe it was a federal judge in Texas or Louisiana that said that LNG projects are within the public interest. When some lawyers were challenged, and groups that we work with, CEI, I believe, were challenging the Biden administration on clothes washer and dryer bans, they found that the EPA and the DOE did not have the regulatory authority to regulate water usage. Right. So I think especially these rewriting of the rules, or perhaps if they are passed as standalone bills, they will hold up in courts, because there's already precedence in the law that states that these agencies can't regulate electricity or water outside of their bounds. So that's also very good for us too, I think.
That's right. Yeah, I agree.
Let's also talk briefly about, obviously, this abundance message that we're starting to see percolate through all these different executive actions, including, I think, in the declaration of a national energy emergency. And I am a little skeptical of this phrasing, but I understand where it's coming from. I would prefer deregulation to a national declaration in this manner, but I understand where the president is coming from. So he writes in this executive order, we need a reliable, diversified, and affordable supply of energy to drive our nation's manufacturing, transportation, agriculture, and defense industries, and to sustain the basics of modern life and military preparedness. Caused by the harmful and short-sighted policies of the previous admin, our nation's inadequate energy supply and infrastructure causes and makes worse the high energy prices that devastate Americans, particularly those living on low and fixed incomes. He says energy security is an increasingly crucial theater of global competition in an effort to harm the American people. Hostile state and non-foreign actors have targeted our domestic infrastructure, yada, yada. And he says an affordable and reliable domestic supply of energy is a fundamental requirement for the national and economic security of any nation. And I like that phrasing. It just straight into my veins, right? Hearing about this abundance messaging, even if you don't necessarily like the particular framing of a national energy emergency. But I understand where it's coming from, because Biden depleted the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. I believe for whatever we were producing, we were also exhausting, oil reserves pretty, evenly. And that also has put us in a very vulnerable position. And these leases or these expanded oil and gas activity was because of grandfathered leases from Trump's administration. And then we have to wait to see what the impact of Biden not allowing for different offshore leases and for him keeping reliable energy like coal, oil, and natural gas in the ground, taking forever to really supercharge nuclear. Yep. So for now, they're still kind of riding the high of grandfathered leases and exploration from Trump 1.0. We don't know what the damage will be if Trump's agenda is thwarted or challenged legally, or Congress doesn't pass anything to codify. But we think in the long term, if no changes are made, we will see this diminishment of supply. So I understand where this declaration comes from. What about this declaration stuck out to you? That was aside from the abundance phrasing.
Right. Well, I mean, the abundance phrasing is fantastic, and it's important too when we're having these conversations. A lot of us, we always talk about energy abundance, or even before we were talking about maybe the difference between energy independence versus security versus dominance. But when we talk about energy abundance, it's not just, again, it can't just become a replacement for all of the above, right? Energy abundance means we need a strong, abundant, it has to be reliable, a reliable and secure supply of energy. And that's what we need in abundance. We need an abundant supply of reliable, affordable, and secure energy. We can't run a full-time economy on part-time energy. That's not how this is going to work. And a lot of the things that I think these things are targeted at, one of the things that we've talked about before is that it was in the previous administration from Biden Harris, it was death by 1,000 cuts to American energy all across the board. Whether it was the green energy subsidies in the IRA, whether it was the EPA power plant rule, the pause on LNG, there was the out the door trying to end offshore drilling for oil and gas. There was so much. So what I see when I see this order and asking the different agency heads to effectively do an audit, like what are the things within your areas of responsibility that we can reverse all the things that are going to not allow real abundance, that are not going to allow real energy dominance. So when I'm seeing this, that was my takeaway. That was my takeaway from that, is that this is more, in telling the different agency heads again to do an audit of what needs to be, what are the walls that have been built up that need to be knocked down, and where are what are the clogs that need to be cleared out, so we can streamline permitting, that we can streamline bringing on more reliable energy sources onto the grid, that we can expand energy production. And I would hope that within this sort of energy emergency, that there's a way for the federal agencies to also put a pause and halt the early retirement of our reliable coal plants and reliable natural gas plants, or just reliable plants, period, regardless of the energy source. I mean, because one of the effects that the previous administration had through their draconian policies was forcing arbitrarily the early retirements of our reliable power plants. So I'm not sure what this does specifically, but I would hope that where these federal agencies have the authority to put a pause on that, and let's reevaluate that they do that. But I also hope now that we get robust federalism, and that the states, where a lot of these regulatory elements take place at the state level, that they also do things to ensure that these early retirements are stopped. If the most affordable thing we can do is to keep an active power plant that can still keep producing, keep that plant online. That's the cheapest thing we can do, is to keep these plants online as we work to build out more base load. But really, what I hope this does at the state regulatory level is that we start to see states enact policies that ensure retiring baseload capacity is replaced with equally baseload capacity, and the same thing for dispatchability. That if a baseload or dispatchable plant is coming offline, that they cannot come offline until equal capacity, equal load is brought onto the grid to match that. And because of things like the IRA subsidies, we've seen our energy markets, particularly within RTOs, just poisoned to the point that intermittency and part-time unreliable energy like wind and solar get moved to the top of the queue. And you have intermittent unreliable sources that are going to try to attempt to replace baseload and dispatchable sources. We know that doesn't work. So my hope is that we're going to now start to have the perfect ingredients into the soup pot. The executive orders that President Trump has put out, whatever Congress can do to codify that, and that the states also now start to take action to make sure that we are, in fact, that all the levers of government at the state and federal level are being put in place to achieve true abundance for reliable and affordable energy.
It was also very interesting to see in that Unleashing American Energy Directive that they are suspending further funding to both the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, which was not bipartisan. There was no single Republican who voted for that. And the similarly misnamed Inflation Reduction Act, which was the Green New Deal Light. So I was very encouraged to see that they're suspending that, because it's going to invite a lot of boondoggles, more inflation. Everyone saw with their eyes that these two bills, in particular the latter, invited environmental inflation, which drove up the cost of energy, derivatives of energy, and so forth. So I think that was very smart to do. And I think you and I have called for, and at our respective workplaces, I think we're going to be working to ensure that those subsidies are removed entirely. I would like to see a full repeal. If it's my ideal situation or scenario, I want to see a full repeal of that, because most of that legislation goes to green subsidies, which do nothing to boost reliable energy whatsoever. And perhaps incriminate the grid and make it a lot more vulnerable and just not reliable whatsoever. And That's so right. I was encouraged to see that. We'll see if there's any challenges, because there's like 20 House Republicans who want to keep those, which makes no sense, but they're doing it because they think it will protect them electorally speaking. But I think the caucus altogether is going to say, no, we need to actually rid of the IRA and discourage it because it undermines President Trump's agenda.
That's right. Well, and I think, President Trump said it right. Why do you want energy that can only survive because of subsidies? I know he was talking specifically about offshore wind, which is incredibly expensive and damaging to the environment.
Form. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the most expensive form. It's also carbon intensive to make, which is ironic, because there's no need for it. There's really not a need for some of these energy sources. I think what is the need? And surely there are places onshore in particular where a certain deployment of solar or deployment of wind in certain places might make sense. But again, I think this has to be filtered through a matrix of what is the most affordable, least cost option that is going to maintain the reliability and adequacy of the grid. It has to be filtered through that. And the truth of the matter is that a lot of the deployment of renewables hasn't been put through that filter. It's been put through this eco-fundamentalist filter with the idea that we have to decarbonize, and we have to do it so quickly that we've now put ourselves in a place where the grid is at risk. The risk of rolling blackouts and brownouts are higher than they've ever been. It's increased the cost of energy. We're paying more money for less reliable energy. That's not a way to do that. The most prudent way to do that is to say, look, we're not going to pick winners and losers, but we are going to have basic rules in place for reliability. We know what the grid needs to keep humming, to keep it online, to keep the lights on. We know you have to be able to meet peak demand. If you can do that, you can come online, and it has to be done in the most least cost way possible, because a reliable grid is an affordable grid. And what I think that actually does, if we can get rid of these subsidies and start, redirecting the market forces at play here to make sure that consumers are protected and that the market is designed in a place that emphasizes the need for reliable and affordable power instead of just being farms for harvesting subsidies. That's a great energy future, and that's great. And I think that would actually be better for renewables, because it would actually increase innovation. These are market incentives that would incentivize them to, hey, we need to be more competitive. We want to be more reliable. Why wouldn't you be? We want to be more affordable. Why wouldn't you be? So these are market incentives that could come in place that would actually help help renewables become more reliable and would bring them onto the grid. The technology is not there at this moment for them at utility scale to replace baseload or dispatchability, but certainly there is a place. Part of energy security is to have a diversified grid, but you want to make sure it's going through that matrix of reliability and affordability in a least cost generation plan. And really, I think that's the heart of President Trump's American energy dominance agenda, and what we're seeing from a lot of these executive orders. I think the spirit of this is away from sort of arbitrary climate goals and away towards prudential and responsible environmentalism that puts people first, that is ensuring that we have an affordable, reliable grid. And we can do this while responsibly conserving and protecting the environment. These things don't go against each other. And I would just hope that our conservative climate friends understand this, and that they would get on board with this message, and that there's a way to do this. And I think there are many of us who work in this space alongside with those of the center right who are hyper focused on environmental issues, and rightfully so. I'm glad we have those allies, but I hope they recognize the heart of what's going on here, and that it's not enough to It's not enough to just simply say all of the above. It's not enough to just talk about free market reforms. It's not enough to just talk about energy abundance. We have to be crystal clear of what we're talking about here when we're talking about the reliability and adequacy of our grids and energy affordability, and have real practical, pragmatic policy solutions that are going to deliver those things for everyday Americans.
As you were just talking, I got an email from a general free market ally asking me to sign on to a letter opposing Trump's wind executive order, claiming it would be the not so source neutral approach, and that they want the free market to determine what is best fit for people and communities. And my understanding is, reading into the wind executive, it would actually put back that sector into the private sector, because right now it's government basically propping up wind. Like, you look at every wind company, every wind project, there's not a private stake whatsoever, much. It's very minimal. And so right now the federal government, through the IRA and other related climate centric legislation, is barely keeping these industries afloat. I think I just read the news today that one of the major wind players lost like a huge chunk of their shares. Like, shares are going down, and it's not profitable because the energy is not dispatchable and reliable. Right. And so to me, we are going to see some pushback from some of our friends, even in the fiscal space, who say that, these orders are going to jeopardize the market. But right now, the market is not favoring it. And I see this as him turning this issue back to the market, saying the government should not be subsidizing this because it's not reliable. And of course, there's the discussion about, should we subsidize all sources? And I don't think some of the other sources are as subsidized as solar and wind. Ideally, we don't want any source to be subsidized. But the thing is, this is overwhelmingly being subsidized. So I don't see what their logic is in terms of opposing it, because right now the market does not favor or is favoring wind whatsoever. So I found that to be really funny. Funny aside there. Go ahead.
Well, and real quick, and I've been seeing ads on social media all the time. They're obviously pretty targeted, because I forget what exactly, and I don't even know who's putting them out, but I've seen it a few times. Something like, wind power is American energy dominant, or like is part of American dominant future, whatever it is. And I just have to kind of laugh, because it's clearly not. And again, at least the technology is right now. And as you pointed out, these things are not operating in a pure free market. The market has been so coerced because of these subsidies. And in a perfect world, we want an absolute as free market as possible, but we also have to work in the realities that are at play, and these policies that, and I think President Trump has made it very clear why he's against offshore wind. And I think even from, and it makes perfect sense. If these projects want to continue, they should be able to continue without being propped up by government subsidies and by taxpayers who are going to pay for these projects, again, in the name of protecting the environment, while they're simultaneously killing the whales and are extremely carbon intensive. And for the amount of power output that they actually give us, is it really worth it? And I think those are the kinds of, again, they need to be going through a matrix of reliability and cost. And does this make sense? And right now, offshore wind just does not make sense for a load of reasons.
Absolutely, it does not. And I will take that to, I wouldn't say the grave, but I will take it with me. It was very similar to like opposing ESG. Sometimes there are these little fissures in the free market space where people will say, how could you oppose ESG? Because then you're also doing the opposite in undermining the market with that. And then similar with wind, they think, well, it is for the free market to support it because it's the future. But I have yet to see proof that it's the future. Nuclear is the future. I think all of us can understand and see that with the demand for that, because it's a baseload reliable power. It's not expensive. It's not land intensive. It's not going to be imperiling wildlife or nature, things of that sort. It's very safe and secure. So if we're putting, those two sources, so-called clean energy sources, nuclear overpowers it any day of the week. Like you can't compare. So I would rather see, maybe in the beginning, I wouldn't call it government investments, but maybe the encouragement of nuclear catalyzation, and then let it fully unleash and bring it wholly to the private sector. Let the private sector run with it, cut red tape, do all that. Right. That's what ideally needs to be done under the focus of the government, not propping up artificially solar and wind. And even in this emergency declaration, Trump excludes any mention of solar and wind, onshore, offshore wind too.
Right. Well, and we've seen this happen in Pennsylvania, right, with 3 Mile Island. I mean, with Microsoft coming in, I think we're going to see a lot more of big tech coming in and partnering and helping to bring. They recognize that they need more base load. So I think that is I think you're going to see with the AI advancement and revolution, we're going to see a lot more nuclear come online. And I'm with you. I mean, I think if we allowed market forces to work, and we're not picking winners and losers, I do think the market is eventually going to pick those winners and losers because the market's going to figure out what it needs to keep price, to keep inflation down, to keep prices affordable, to keep the grid online. Nuclear provides baseload power. That is obviously we're going to need more of it. Natural gas is the leading driver of reducing emissions in the United States. So, I mean, if you want a clean, reliable future, I mean, it makes the most sense right now for nuclear and natural gas to be leading the pack, and everything that we've done with scrubbers and everything else to make coal cleaner. I mean, that's also very affordable, very reliable. If we can keep coal plants online as long as possible, but I mean, I really do think the future is nuclear and natural gas, especially if we allow the market to drive those things. That just seems to me to make the most sense because that's going to give you the right makeup of a reliable and an affordable energy grid, and then grid diversification. Strategic deployments of renewables, again, keeping coal online where we can, strategic deployments of hydro, that will give you the diverse grid. But if we're prioritizing reliability and affordability, those things are going to come naturally instead of the government arbitrarily pushing up any source, but particularly those that are only providing part-time energy.
That's what I think we can dissect from Trump's executive action, and then it's going to hopefully tilt to the Congress to codify permanently or say we want the market to determine what type of sources are adequate and essential to power the grid, this growing electricity demand, as you said, nuclear, natural gas. But also, I think Doug Burgum even said coal might be used to power AI too. I thought that was very interesting to hear those as well. So yes, I mean, coal and natural gas combined power 60% of electricity generation in this country. Nuclear is the second largest source after natural gas. So it'd be really foolish to abandon that. And like I said, I think the voters certainly saw this. They said, we are tired of solar and wind being artificially propped up. They don't add any benefit. Most of that electricity, they targeted red states to construct these projects. Most of that electricity supposedly generated after that monstrosity of a farm or a field is constructed, that all goes to blue states who say they want this clean energy source production, but they don't want to construct anymore, and they're going to leech off of red states for this supposed reliable energy coming from these clean energy projects. It's That's a mouthful to adjust. So people see that disparity. They see that, this kind of mismatch, and they see that this doesn't work. What solar and wind work only. Solar, I think, is 25% of the time of the year. Wind at best is 35 onshore. I think offshore it's maybe 45% of the time of the year. So people are smart and they see that wind generation is also down. Solar had a very bad 2024, wind before that, a bad 2023. So the conditions are not ripe to keep these, obviously, structures alive. So I think Trump is right to do this. Andre, while we have you for the remainder of the program, what else do you think my listeners should be aware of now that we have this new administration? What is your organization specifically working on?
Right. So, I mean, we're very excited to see a lot of these executive orders come out that are aligned with our policy agenda, the things we've been advocating for. To see movement on the reversal of the LNG pause is exciting. We especially for Pennsylvania. Same thing we can start to see some of these EPA regulations get pulled back with the Clean Power Plant rule. But one thing I think I'll highlight, which I know you've worked a lot on, Gabby, is the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. That's a fight in Pennsylvania that is still alive and well, thanks to Governor Josh Shapiro. We had hope. The Commonwealth Court had struck down the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative as unconstitutional, which is correct. It's an energy tax that is placed, and the Pennsylvania entered it through a unilateral executive order by a previous governor. The governor does not have the power of the purse. That's supposed to come through the legislature, but he imposed it. The Commonwealth Court said unconstitutional. You cannot impose a tax, and Governor Shapiro is now appealing that lower court decision to the state Supreme Court. So we'll see what's happening there. I know in Virginia, for you, Glenn Youngkin is also having this Reggie battle. So I'm very excited about what's happening at the federal level with all of these things, but there's a lot of fights in the states, whether it's fighting energy taxes like the regional greenhouse gas initiative, or whether it's dealing with our RTOs like PJM and dealing with these electricity markets. There's going to be a lot of work at the state level to ensure that we have permitting reform and that we have streamlining for energy and environmental projects. So there's a lot of work to do, but I think all the right levers of government are in place. And so I'm excited, working for a state-based think tank. I'm excited about the opportunities where we can start to see positive trends at the federal level trickle down to the state level as well. So we can get, more freedom for more people. I think a lot of the regulatory reform and streamlining and permitting that I hope is coming down the pipe are things that we're certainly very excited about for working at the state level.
There will be positive spillover effects, I think, even for blue states, because there they also oppose the gas-powered, they oppose the gas bans on cars and also on appliances. Berkeley, for some interesting reason, decided to positively rescind, the gas stove ban for new household construction. So it's even going to be positive for those blue areas or these full electrification areas where the consumers are seeing higher costs for something as simple as the type of car you drive, the type of appliances you have. So I think it will have great spillover effects, not only in red states and federally, but also in the kind of hard to reach states. Andre, it's a pleasure to have you on. We're going to have you back, of course, as this new administration plays out. Once we see Chris Wright, Burgum, Zeldin confirmed, those confirmations should hopefully be in the horizon very soon in the next few weeks. So pleasure to have you on. Thank you again. Keep us posted with what's going on.
Will do. Thanks so much for having me.
If you enjoyed this installment of District of Conservation, I would love to know your feedback. Send it my way. Please be sure to leave us reviews on Apple, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are played, and also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to never miss a beat nor a guest announcement. Thanks so much for listening to District of Conservation. I hope you have a wonderful day, and please share the podcast to those who may be interested in learning more about these critical natural resources, environment, energy issues.